Hey there, it's Tara. I want to talk today about something that I see all the time with empaths that I work with. It's certainly something that I struggle with myself, even in everything that I do and all the tools I use. And it's something I call hyper-responsibility syndrome. And what that is as an empath, we tend to feel that we are responsible for not only all the pain in the entire universe, but certainly for helping or fixing all of that pain. So if you find yourself oftentimes at night being unable to close your eyes without visualizing, whatever horrible thing is happening in the world, or people that need your help that you can't do anything about, if you find yourself tossing and turning a lot at night, feeling just constantly overwhelmed and connected to this, if you tend to have a situation where you apologize 1,000 times a day, even when you haven't done anything to apologize for, you haven't done anything wrong, then you probably have hyper-responsibility syndrome. And so one of the things that I see that sort of causes this, in particular in empaths, is that we oftentimes will grow up in families where a lot of our sensitivity, our desire to help other people can be very manipulated. And it can be put in a position where people around us kind of have this learned helplessness type of thing where they just figure that we're going to come through. Or if you were a child and you were parentified, meaning that as a kid, you were taking on a lot of adult responsibilities. You were taking on a lot of what really your parents were supposed to be doing. But maybe you had parents who were emotionally children, or maybe you had parents who were incapable of taking on their own things. Or maybe you had parents that were depressed all the time, or they were sick a lot of the time. And when you have that, and when you are an empath child, and you don't have anyone else to be sort of defending you or setting healthy boundaries for you, then of course, as a child, you want your parents to be happy. You want to find ways to make them feel better. And on top of it, as an empath child, you're literally feeling their need, even if your parent leaned all the way towards being a full-on narcissist, where there was so much need and it's never going to be filled. You could keep throwing all the happiness and joy and helpfulness that you possibly could at that person, and it's never going to be enough. The problem is, as a kid, when you see your parents suffering, or they tell you they're suffering in some way, or they put their adult emotions on you or include you in adult situations you shouldn't have been part of, then when you can't make that person happy, when you can't help them to feel better, when you can't solve what an adult can't even solve themselves or is unwilling to solve, then that puts you in a position of feeling like you are responsible for everything that everyone around you is feeling, and that you are failing at being able to help people. Then on top of the already deep compulsion that we have as empaths to help people, because we are feeling everybody else's pain and need, then on top of that, we have this additional compulsion that came from our inability to help our parents to be able to solve their problems or be better. Now, as a child, you shouldn't have had any of that put on you. And so as a child, you were going to fail at being able to solve the adult problems in the adults in your lives, situations or whatever was experiences, what was happening with them. You were going to fail because children inherently aren't supposed to have to solve those things. You're supposed to be able to go climb trees and run with your friends and giggle and not have all that put on you. The problem is that messaging that you had as a child that told you that you did fail, that you were unable to help people in your life that you loved the most, it stays with you. And it turns into this hyper-responsibility syndrome. So as you get older, you end up being the person that everybody comes to help solve their problems. And sometimes you can, and that's great. That was my experience. And as a kid or as a teenager, I saw the patterns in people's lives, and I was able to help my friends a lot of times, when they were bouncing ideas off me or bouncing issues off me that were going on in their life, I was able to help. And so Like that is fantastic. It's a great use. Now, it can be very overwhelming because you don't have the ability necessarily to know how to turn it off. Because as a child, if you were in those kinds of situations as a kid and all that stuff was being put on you, and you never knew when the adults in your life were going to expect you to be there and be happy and shiny and help them, then there was no ability for you to ever turn it off. You weren't told you were allowed to turn off your ability to help or your awareness. And so all of that becomes very compounded and turns into this hyper responsibility syndrome where you literally cannot turn off things in your head when you go to sleep. You feel compelled to help beyond the point of any kind of reasonable situation or being able to help somebody. You jump in and you help and you allow other people to basically not have to carry all the stuff that they have to carry. And you tell yourself, well, they can't, or they don't have these opportunities, or they don't have this, or they don't have that. And sometimes that's true. But many times we as empaths have to learn to be able to put this down, to disconnect, to allow people to be able to start solving their own problems. One thing that helped me many years ago with this is I talked to a life coach, and I was having a situation in my life where I felt that I was literally the only person who could solve this individual in my life's problems. And I was working myself into the ground to try to hold all this up that I shouldn't have been holding up, that, and carrying all these things on my shoulders that I shouldn't have been carrying. But all I knew was I felt that this person was going to be incapable, and that what if this person failed? And if they failed, then, as we do as empaths, I went down this long tail of the horrible things, and it was going to be all my fault because I didn't help enough. I didn't solve enough. I didn't fix enough. Right? And definitely like the video and subscribe if this sounds like you, because I'll have lots more content about how to deal with hyper responsibility syndrome and how to fix this. And so I talked to this life coach, and I was telling her what was going on, and I knew I didn't have boundaries, but on top of it, I couldn't let this person just fail. And I remember her saying to me, "You are a spiritual irritant." And I remember being so pissed when she said this, because I thought, I'm not a spiritual irritant. I am the one going around trying to help. And I'm picking all this stuff up and I'm helping. But as she talked me through it, she was right. So what she was talking about is many times, as is true for all of us, things are put in our path that we need to have the ability to solve for ourselves. And by solving it for ourselves, even with a little bit of help, but by solving it for ourselves, we show and we learn resourcefulness. We learn a lesson that allows us to carry forward into something else that we need. It's a building block for our own self-confidence because we solved our problem, and it's a building block for maybe future obstacles or challenges that we need to learn. And her point was that I wasn't allowing this individual to learn their own spiritual lessons by constantly jumping in and saving this person and feeling that I was responsible for saving them. Now, I did have to work a lot after that in getting through this feeling that if I let them fail, I was responsible for that failing, when in fact, this person was a fully grown adult, had been doing a lot of stuff perfectly fine and successfully before I came along, and sure enough was going to be able to pull their resources together and figure this out. And so that helped me a great deal in learning that, maybe I was being a spiritual irritant. And so I offer that to you today, to look at things in your life where you feel that you can't put them down, or that if you help, this person's going to fail. I know there have been people in my life that, I've said, unfortunately, sometimes the only way to save somebody is to kind of let them go down under the water, so to speak. If you keep holding them at this level and they're able to just breathe, they're out there dog paddling in the water and they're able to breathe, but they never kind of have to learn to swim for themselves, then you're not really helping them. And that's something that hopefully you can carry forward as an empath. The other thing with hyper-responsibility syndrome that is super helpful is I would suggest every night doing a disconnect exercise. Now, you can do it a lot of different ways. I teach it in several different ways in the Empath Institute and actually in the body language course that I have. But one of the easiest ways is to simply close your eyes, imagine yourself as being connected to all of these things, whatever it is. And you can actually see if you have certain people you're connected to that you feel like you're constantly picking up, you're constantly having to save, even if they really can save themselves, but they've convinced you that they can't, or they've convinced you you're responsible for their happiness. Imagine those people. And then you're actually going to imagine that you have like a cord, like a computer cord or a plug, and that plug is actually plugged either into that person or into you. Either way, doesn't matter. And then I want you to actually close your eyes, say to yourself, I now release you. You are capable of handling this. Or I release this situation. You are capable of handling this. Like, one of the things that can happen a lot for us as empaths is that we'll start feeling this massive weight of the world, and then we won't know until later or the next day that something really, really massive or very tragic has happened in the world. And then the problem is that we're connected to that tragedy. And if we are in a situation where there is literally no way for us to go and help those people, if we stay connected to that emotion of that tragedy, then all we're doing is dragging energy from ourselves that we could use in our immediate network of people who truly need or deserve or can have, then we can do something to help. And so I suggest that if you are closing your eyes, like I do many nights, so just to let you know, I have to use this practice myself, and actually see yourself pulling away the plug from that individual. I oftentimes like to also send that person or that situation a ton of energy. I try to imagine myself like enshrouding that with energy and then pulling the plug. So that can be super, super helpful. But what I mostly want you to get from this video is that it's very likely, if you're an empath, you have hyper-responsibility syndrome, that it is possible for you to be able to start putting things down and getting things disconnected from you. And that you can start using some of these practices to be able to actually start to feel better. Because I can tell you from experience, when you are in full-on hyper-responsibility syndrome mode and you cannot put these things down, the amount of energy that it's taking from you and your life and your ability to live a good life, which you also deserve as an empath, by the way, is massive. So I really hope that these videos, and I'll have another one coming up pretty quickly about how to stop apologizing, because a lot of hyper-responsibility syndrome, it's a good indication that you have it if you've been apologizing a zillion times a day. So how to stop apologizing and what you don't have to apologize for. So if you like this video, please subscribe. You can check out the Empath Institute and my body language course. Both have lots of tools and resources for empaths. The body language is particularly good if you are dealing with pain and disease in your life and you would like to be able to know how to solve it. Thanks so much. See you next time.